I want to tell you about the most expensive mistake I've ever made. It wasn't buying the wrong stock, or getting divorced, or even that time I bought a boat. It was trusting a Thai property developer with my life savings. My name is Cedric Martinez, I'm 47 years old, and I'm from Denver, Colorado. 2 years ago, I thought I was making the smartest investment of my life. Today, I'm here to tell you exactly how I lost $180,000 in Thailand, and more importantly, what you need to know, so this never happens to you. This story isn't easy to tell. I kept it to myself for months, too embarrassed to admit what really happened. But silence costs people more than money. So here it is, the whole truth. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if these stories help you steer clear of the same cliffs, there's a little super thanks button below, totally optional, but deeply appreciated. Let me paint you a picture of where I was in my life when this all started. It was January 2023, and I had just sold my construction company in Denver. After 15 years of building custom homes, I was burnt out. The Colorado market was getting crazy, materials were through the roof, and frankly, I was tired of dealing with entitled clients who wanted million-dollar homes but complained about every invoice. The sale netted me about $400,000 after taxes and paying off debts. Not bad for a guy who started with nothing but a pickup truck and a toolbox. My wife Sarah and I were talking about what to do next. She wanted to buy a bigger house in Cherry Creek. I wanted something different. See, I'd been watching YouTube videos about expat life in Thailand. You know, the ones, guys living like kings on a fraction of what it costs in the States. But what really caught my attention weren't the lifestyle videos, it was the real estate content. Video after video showing Western guys who'd made fortunes buying condos in Bangkok and Pattaya. One video in particular stuck with me. This British guy named James claimed he was making 15% annual returns on rental properties in Thailand. 15%. I was lucky to get 3% in a Denver savings account. He showed his portfolio. Dozens of units, rental income statements, the works. It looked legitimate. It looked like the opportunity of a lifetime. Sarah wasn't convinced. "Cedric, you don't know anything about Thai real estate," she said. "What if something goes wrong? What if the government changes the rules? What if you can't get your money out?" But I'd done construction for 15 years. I understood property, I understood markets, and I understood opportunity. How different could it be? In March 2023, I booked a 2-week trip to Thailand. I told Sarah it was just reconnaissance. I'd look around, get a feel for the market, maybe talk to a few agents. No commitments. Bangkok blew my mind. The energy, the growth, the construction cranes everywhere. It reminded me of Denver in the early 2000s, right before the big boom. I could practically smell the money in the air. I spent the first week in Bangkok looking at condos with various agents. The prices seemed reasonable. You could get a nice one-bedroom in a decent area for $100,000 to $150,000. The agents all spoke decent English and seemed professional. They showed me rental yield calculations, occupancy rates, market projections. Everything looked solid. But it was during my second week, when I went down to Pattaya, that I met the man who would change my life forever. His name was Bo Chai Wong, and he wasn't like the other agents I'd met. For starters, he was Thai, not some Western expat playing middleman. He was about my age, impeccably dressed, and he spoke perfect English with a slight British accent. He told me he'd studied at Cambridge and worked in London for 10 years before coming back to Thailand to get into development. Bo didn't show me existing properties. Instead, he took me to a construction site in Jom Tien, just south of Pattaya. "Cedric," he said, "anyone can buy a finished condo and maybe make 6 to 7% returns. But if you want real money, you need to get in at the ground floor." The project was called Sunset Paradise. It was going to be a 40-story luxury tower right on the beach. The plans looked incredible. Infinity pools, rooftop gardens, concierge service, the works. But here's what got my attention. Bao wasn't just selling units. He was offering investment partnerships. Look, he explained as we stood on the beach where the tower would rise. I could sell you a condo for $200,000, and maybe you'd make decent returns. But I'm offering something better. Become an investor in the development itself. Help us fund the construction, and you'll get a percentage of all sales, plus a guaranteed unit at cost. He pulled out a tablet and showed me the numbers. If I invested $180,000, I'd get a 1.5% stake in the entire development. Based on their projections, that stake would be worth over $500,000 once all units were sold. Plus, I'd get a 2-bedroom penthouse unit valued at $350,000 for just $180,000. The math is simple, Bao said. Total investment, $180,000. Total return, over $650,000. That's a 260% return in 18 months. I'd been in construction long enough to know that developments can be gold mines for investors who get in early. The numbers weren't crazy. They were actually conservative compared to some projects I'd seen in Denver. And Bo had all the documentation, permits, architectural plans, construction contracts, even pre-sales agreements from other units. I flew back to Denver with a head full of numbers and a briefcase full of documents. Sarah took one look at my face and knew I was hooked. "You're actually considering this, aren't you?" she said. "I'm considering doing research," I replied. "There's a difference." But she was right. I was already mentally spending the returns. I spent the next month doing what I thought was thorough due diligence. I hired a Denver attorney who specialized in international investments. I paid $5,000 for a consultation with a firm that supposedly vetted overseas real estate opportunities. I even found a Thai-American lawyer in Los Angeles who reviewed all the Thai language documents. Everything checked out. The permits were real. The construction company had a solid track record. The architectural firm was legitimate. The pre-sales contracts looked genuine. Even the Thai lawyer said the legal structure was sound. "This looks like a legitimate development opportunity," he told me over the phone. "The partnership structure is standard for Thailand, and the documentation appears to be in order. Obviously, there are always risks with overseas investments, but from a legal standpoint, I don't see any red flags." The Denver attorney was more cautious. "Cedric, I can verify that these documents look legitimate, but I can't verify the people behind them or the actual progress of the project. If you're going to do this, I'd recommend starting with a smaller amount." But Bo had been clear. The minimum investment for partnership level was $180,000. Anything less, and I'd just be buying a regular unit like any other buyer. I called Bo several times over those weeks. He was always patient with my questions, always professional. He sent me additional documentation without being asked. He put me in touch with 2 other Western investors who'd already committed to the project, a German businessman and an Australian retiree. Both spoke highly of Bo and the opportunity. The Australian, whose name was Robert, had been living in Thailand for 5 years. "Mate, I've seen a lot of dodgy deals here," he told me over Skype. "This isn't one of them. Bao's the real deal, and this project is going to make us all very wealthy." By May 2023, I'd made my decision. Sarah wasn't happy, but she'd agreed to let me invest $180,000, about 45% of our liquid assets, as long as I promised that was the limit. "If this goes south," she said, "we're not throwing good money after bad. This is it." The wire transfer process was surprisingly straightforward. Bao's company, Andaman Development Group, had a proper business account with Bangkok Bank. All the routing numbers and account details matched the official documents. I wasn't sending money to some sketchy offshore account. This was a legitimate Thai corporation with proper banking. On May 15, 2023, I sent $180,000 from my Bank of America account to Bangkok Bank. The transfer took 2 days to clear, and on May 17th, I received confirmation that the funds had been received. Bao called me personally to confirm. "Cedric, welcome to the Sunset Paradise family. You've made an excellent decision. Construction will begin in earnest next month, and I'll be sending you monthly progress reports. I felt like I was on top of the world. I'd just bought into what I was convinced would be the deal of a lifetime. For the first 3 months, everything went exactly as promised. Every month, I received detailed progress reports with photos of the construction site. The foundation was being laid, the concrete was being poured, and the steel framework was starting to rise. Bao was in constant communication, sending updates via WhatsApp and email. He sent photos of permits being approved, meetings with contractors, even videos of himself walking through the construction site explaining the progress. In August, he sent me something that made my heart race: the first investor dividend check. It was only $2,700, but it was exactly what the projections had promised for month 3. This is from the pre-sales of the lower floors, Bao explained. As we sell more units, your dividends will increase. I showed the check to Sarah, and for the first time since I'd made the investment, she smiled. Maybe you knew what you were doing after all, she said. I was so confident in the investment that I started telling friends about it. I posted photos of the construction progress on Facebook. I even started researching other opportunities in Thailand, thinking about maybe increasing my investment when the next phase opened. But then September came, and everything started to change. The September progress report was late. When it finally arrived, it was shorter than usual and the photos seemed off. Instead of showing continued vertical progress, they showed the same level of construction as the previous month, just from different angles. I messaged Bo about it. Hey, it looks like progress might have slowed down. Is everything okay? His response came a day later. Cedric, we've had some delays with permits for the upper floors. Nothing serious, just Thai bureaucracy. We expect to be back on track next month. October's report was even more concerning. The photos were clearly old. I could tell because the signage in the background was the same as photos from June. When I pointed this out, Bo apologized and said there had been a mix-up with the photo files. But the real alarm bell went off when I tried to call him directly. For months, Bo had always answered his phone or called back within hours. Now, it was taking days to get responses to messages. And when he did respond, his explanations were vague and rushed. In November, I decided to fly back to Thailand to see the project for myself. I didn't tell Bo I was coming. I wanted to get an unfiltered look at the progress. What I found made my blood run cold. The Sunset Paradise construction site looked exactly the same as it had in May. The foundation was there, and some of the ground floor structure, but there was no sign of the rapid progress that had been documented in the monthly reports. Worse, when I asked around the neighborhood, local residents told me that construction had been stopped for months. The workers had disappeared in August, around the same time I'd received my one and only dividend check. I tried calling Bo, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I went to the address listed for Andaman Development Group, but it was just a small office in a co-working space, and the receptionist said no one from that company had been there in weeks. That's when I started to piece together what had really happened. I tracked down Robert, the Australian investor who'd spoken so highly of Bo. It took some digging, but I found his contact information and called him. "Oh, mate," he said when I explained the situation. "I'm so sorry. I thought you knew. The whole thing collapsed in August. Bao disappeared with all the money." "What do you mean disappeared?" "I mean he's gone, vanished. The Australian embassy is helping me file a police report, but the Thai police say there's not much they can do." Apparently, this wasn't his first time. Robert explained that he'd lost $220,000 in the scam. The German businessman had lost even more, nearly $400,000. And we weren't the only ones. Robert had found at least 8 other investors, all Westerners, who'd been taken for amounts ranging from $150,000 to $500,000. The bastard was running a classic Ponzi scheme, Robert said. He used our money to pay fake dividends to earlier investors to make it look like the project was legitimate. Meanwhile, he was pocketing most of the cash. I spent the next week in Thailand trying to salvage something from the disaster. I hired a local attorney, filed a police report, and even tried to track down Bo's real identity. What I learned was sobering. Bao Chai Wong wasn't even his real name. His actual name was Somchai Ruangki, and he'd been running real estate scams for over a decade. The Cambridge education was fake. The London work experience was fake. Even the construction company he'd claimed to be working with had never heard of him. The Thai police were sympathetic, but realistic. This happens to many foreigners, the detective told me through a translator. These men are very good at what they do. They know exactly what Western investors want to hear. The attorney I hired was more blunt. Mr. Martinez, I must be honest with you. The chance of recovering your money is very small. Maybe 5%. These scammers, they move the money very quickly to many different accounts, different countries. By the time you discover the fraud, the money is gone. I flew back to Denver devastated, not just because of the money, though $180,000 was a huge loss for us. I was devastated because I'd been so completely fooled. I'd done everything I thought was right, due diligence, legal review, verification of documents, and still walked straight into a trap. The next few months were the darkest of my life. Sarah and I fought constantly. She never said, "I told you so," but I could see it in her eyes. Our dreams of early retirement were gone. Our financial security was compromised. And it was all my fault. I became obsessed with trying to track down Bo, Somchai. I joined Facebook groups for scam victims. I spent hours researching Thai property fraud. I even hired a private investigator in Bangkok who took my money and found nothing. The worst part was the shame. I couldn't tell anyone what had happened. When friends asked about my Thailand investment, I made vague comments about market volatility and delayed returns. I was too embarrassed to admit that I'd been completely conned. It wasn't until I found a support group for international investment fraud victims that I started to heal. Hearing other people's stories, smart, successful people who'd been taken in by similar scams, helped me realize that I wasn't stupid. I'd been targeted by professionals who'd perfected their craft over years. So what did I learn from losing $180,000 to a Thai real estate scammer? Here are the hard truths that could save you from making the same mistake. First, understand that document verification means nothing if the documents are fake. Bao had permits, contracts, architectural plans, all professionally forged. The fact that papers look official doesn't mean they're real. Second, references from other investors can be part of the scam. Robert, the Australian who vouched for Bo, was probably a legitimate victim, but he'd been convinced just like I was. Scammers often use their first victims as unwitting references for future marks. Third, any investment that requires a specific minimum amount is a red flag. Legitimate opportunities can usually be scaled up or down. The fact that I had to invest exactly $180,000 to get partnership level should have been a warning sign. Fourth, be suspicious of anyone who discourages you from visiting the investment location. Bo never explicitly told me not to come back to Thailand, but he did suggest that too many visits might complicate the permit process. That was because he knew that anyone who looked closely would see through the facade. Fifth, wire transfers are essentially permanent. Once you send money internationally, especially to a country like Thailand, getting it back is nearly impossible. If someone is pressuring you to wire money quickly, that's a massive red flag. Today, I'm back in the construction business in Denver. Sarah and I are rebuilding our financial future, slowly and carefully. We'll never recover that $180,000, but we've learned to be grateful for what we have and skeptical of what seems too good to be true. I'm telling this story not for sympathy, but for prevention. If my experience stops even one person from falling for a similar scam, then maybe this painful lesson will have been worth something. The dream of easy money and exotic locations is seductive. The YouTube videos, the success stories, the promises of financial freedom, they tap into something deep in our psyche. But remember, if someone is promising you guaranteed returns of 15% or 20% or 25%, they're either lying or they're taking risks with your money that they're not telling you about. Real estate can be a great investment, even overseas real estate. But do your homework, start small, and never invest more than you can afford to lose completely. And if someone is pressuring you to invest quickly, or won't let you take time to think, or insists on specific minimum amounts, walk away. Trust me, the most expensive education you can get is the one that comes from being scammed. Learn from my mistake instead of making your own. Your financial future is too important to gamble on a stranger's promises, no matter how convincing they seem.